All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our Kelly Cawthorn webinar series here. We are absolutely thrilled to be joined by Senate Republican leader Aric Nesbitt today. I was trying to think how many years Aric and I went back, and I think we're about 20 years now at this point since we've met. So, like I said, we're very excited to have Aric share some insights into things going on in the state, perhaps even beyond the state at this point. I don't think Aric needs much of an introduction, but he is the senator from the 20th District, a sixth-generation farmer, graduate of Hillsdale College, as well as the Norwegian School of Economics. He's in his second term, again, as the Republican leader right here, and previously served as the Senate President Pro Tem. I will just kick it over to you, Senator, if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we can probably get into a few questions right here, if that's all right with you.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to a lot of your clients and a lot of folks that are interested in the future of Michigan and the prosperity of Michigan going forward. As Rob mentioned, that grew up in Southwest Michigan on a sixth-generation dairy and grape farm, middle of five kids. That's where Aric with an A comes from. And my oldest brother was Andrew. Then there was Aaron. And by the time Mom got to me, it was either going to be Aric or Erica with an A. And pretty glad she went with Aric. Probably would have grown up a little tougher if it was Erica. And then two younger sisters, April and Angel. The family's still operating the farm. I live down the road from it. My sister lives on it, but we had row crops and dairy and grapes. And you understand why the family has had so many kids. Labor was a lot cheaper that way. And so as I look at it, as Rob mentioned, went to Hillsdale College with my degree in economics, later did a master's in international business. And in 2010, with the end of the lost decade, where we should have been number one, but we were number 50 in so many statistics, and where we should have been number 50, we were number one in so many statistics, and lost jobs, slower population growth. I ran for the state house and worked with Governor Snyder to balance budgets, pay down debt, eliminate unnecessary rules and regulations. And we got to a point of growing the population again in this state. Remember, in the first decade of the 21st century, Michigan was one of only two states to lose population, Louisiana being the other one. I think Louisiana had a bigger excuse. They had a hurricane, and fortunately we had Hurricane Granholm during that first decade here in Michigan. The last few years, we're losing population again. And if the status quo continues over the next 30 years, we'll lose a net of 700 in the state of Michigan. We'll go from around 10 million to around 9.3 million people in Michigan. And so I think it's really time that we shake up the status quo in Lansing, that we get to a yes in a lot of these regulatory agencies and eliminate some of these unnecessary positions, give predictability in permitting, and our education system. I think Michiganders deserve so much better out of Lansing than what they're getting. And you look at it on the education side, 3 out of 4 fourth graders aren't reading at grade level. Same with eighth grade. 3 out of 4 eighth graders aren't reading at grade level. And in fact, Mississippi has better reading scores than Michigan does right now. And don't even get me started on the infrastructure. This is the challenge that continue to face, is how do you prioritize the budget? I know House Republicans and others have submitted plans to actually get up to that $3 billion a year in terms of needed revenue for our roads and bridges and infrastructure. And that's something we're trying to take it as prioritizing in our budget. And unfortunately, over the last 2 years, we've seen a budget surplus squandered in ways that should have went into capital improvements and paying down long-term debt than what we saw in how the Democrat majority and governor did. A young family, 2 kids, a 5-year-old who's turning, seems like 16 in just a few months, but and William, who's 3, and we got a third one on the way, due Easter Sunday, April 20th, but that seems to be measuring about 2 weeks ahead. So I would expect a little earlier birth, like the other 2 were a week early, and both 9 pounds 7 ounces. So we build them big in the Nesbitt family. But from that, invested in the state and what's there, I'm looking forward to traveling around the state. We announced for governor 6 weeks ago, and I've just been humbled by the outpouring of support, both in terms of endorsements and financial support, and those that are willing to help out. So I'm looking forward to, part of the reason why I started so early is engaging folks around the state and engaging folks where they're at.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for covering a lot of topics right there. If you don't mind, I'd like to maybe dive into a couple of those a little bit deeper. And as you mentioned, as a father of young children, and again, congratulations on number 3 coming. Getting out of that man-to-man and going into the zone coverage right there should be fun for you and Trisha there. But if we could focus on education a little bit, as you mentioned, education is crucial for workforce development. I think we've got a hint of where you think Michigan's K through 12 education system is, but can you go into any specific changes that you think you'd like to see, both in your role as a senator and potentially even as in the executive branch?
Yeah, I mean, this actually 4 years ago, Governor Whitmer vetoed reading scholarships for students. We put up a vote where allowing families to actually use $1,000 for kids that had fallen behind in reading, allow families to be involved and have choice in the system. And unfortunately, Governor Whitmer vetoed that 4 years ago today. I think empowering families and empowering parents, making sure that we don't discriminate based upon zip code, just where somebody happens to live. Folks should have access to good schools and should have choice, and there should be accountability. A year ago, Senate Republicans introduced a pretty comprehensive series of reforms that would work to improve reading scores, back to the basics on reading, writing, and arithmetic in our public education system, while also empowering families and students. And that's part of my, as I say, Michigan Students First agenda, is that how do we get back to basics to making sure that students are achieving. And so over the last few years, we've seen some of the basic tenets of accountability repealed, which is, again, I think providing less accountability in our education system is only you're going to see those negative results in the coming years, unfortunately. And then the COVID lockdowns. Let's be honest, I don't think these daycares and elementary schools should have ever been locked down the way they were. And you see it time and time again. I mean, a Stanford study about a year ago went ahead and said that the average student in Michigan's public schools are a year behind because of the COVID lockdowns. And so we have a lot of work to do. That's at the basics. You got to get back to the basics, but also in high school, how do you make sure that you create pathways for students to actually learn? And so as you go ahead and create what those pathways look like, that some are going to be in vocational education, some are going to be going through early college or community college, but all of them, there should be look at what the basis is, what they're able to do in terms of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and how they're getting out in the public sector, and into their career or further education. But at the end of the day, I think the Michigan Merit Curriculum that was done 20 years ago needs full modernization and updating. I think it really destroyed a lot of vocational educational opportunities and co-op opportunities that some students really fit in well. My oldest brother did diesel mechanics his junior year. He did co-op his senior year. That was in the early 90s. I graduated with 25 college credits from having dual enrollment options. And so I think it's about providing one, early elementary and middle school, providing that base for success and education. High school, providing those pathways that I believe is needed for whether folks are going into the trades or into higher education.
I appreciate that. Also, I want to remind people that we do have the Q&A feature right here. If we have some time, we'll try to get to some questions from others out there. But going back to something else that you brought up right there, that's the the potential loss of population. And I know there's been some efforts, you know, through Governor Whitmer as well as others to look at increasing the population here in Michigan. I'm curious what maybe some specifics you have and ideas you have on ensuring that I think the number that you gave out there was a dramatic 700,000 person population decline. You know, what types of things do you think we can do as a state to reverse that?
But I think as you look at going into the next few decades, that how do you go ahead and have a state government that says yes to development, investment, and growth? And unfortunately, over the last several years, with the permits that are the permitting challenges and the barriers that have been put up with capital investment here in Michigan, that unfortunately what the governor had, you know, with their population commission report 2 years ago, and it was issued about 15 months ago, was a damning indictment of the governor's first 5 years in office. And it was unfortunate on both economic development ways, education, and infrastructure, is that as you read through the report, that we need to really look at it as how do we get back to basics? How do we put Michigan first? As I say, capital follows the path of least resistance. In the last 2 years under a Democrat legislature and governor, a Democrat trifecta, you've seen a lot of those barriers continue to increase for investment and growth here in Michigan. And there's plenty of examples where permitting has a real challenge. I mean, I think Ohio and Indiana kick our butts when it comes to predictability and the permitting process. It may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but it's something where if you don't allow folks to actually invest and grow in your state, if you don't provide predictability for those that are willing to invest and grow and bet on your state, they're going to go elsewhere. And I think you saw some money freeze over the last few years when you had the majority Democrats that introduced legislation such as rent control. Anybody who's trying to invest and grow in either multifamily housing or in manufactured housing probably scared off quite a bit of capital over the last few years. You have examples down the street from me where I live in Cassopolis, little county, Cass County, 20 miles away from the Indiana border. Norsk Hydro, a large aluminum recycler manufacturer, was ready to invest $140 million there, 80 new jobs. Not a dime of state money was having to go to it. After the groundbreaking, 10 months later, I'm getting a call from the folks developing that industrial park and saying we haven't been able to actually start construction because of a curb cut from MDOT. I call MEDC. They said that was an MDOT issue. I thought they were all part of Team Michigan. And unfortunately, they don't work that way. And so it took me 10 days of going back and forth with the then MDOT director on getting that curb cut, $140 million investment there. I have a manufacturer up in Holland, family-owned manufacturer. They have a dock out on Lake Macatawa. They're trying to expand it, and unfortunately, go from a stationary to a floating dock. They're in a lawsuit with Eagle right now with the environmental regulators here in the state. $1.3 million of legal costs and engineering costs later, 3 years later, and they still haven't rebuilt something that's important for their customer base, is important for their growth base. And you hear these stories in Muskegon not getting permits. You hear these stories in Pontiac where there's a family-owned business that was trying to expand 1 million new square feet, 500 new jobs, good family supporting jobs. And they could never really even get a call back from the MEDC on what they need. And with a state with a state income tax, we're having to compete with folks like Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, where there's a 4.25% higher expense because of our state income tax. And so as I look at it, if you're going to keep people here, how do you go ahead and have a government? You need to shake up the bureaucracy in Lansing, and you need to have a government that actually is delivering results for the hardworking taxpayers here in Michigan.
Kind of building on that, can you tell me what does an MEDC look like under an Aric Nesbitt?
I think you got to start from the beginning at the end of the day. What we're seeing out of it lacks customer service, it lacks predictability. They seem to do they concentrate more on marketing instead of actually performance based. And so let's look at states that matter. Let's look at states that are actually successful in terms of driving investment and growth and population growth. And let's look at what that looks like. And going back to, you know, if you're going to have an economic garden, the last few years with what you've seen out of this administration was that they've used Roundup to kill off all these plants in the economic garden. And now they're trying to use billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money to pay folks to transplant into that garden that they've already used Roundup. And that's what it is when you go ahead and you repeal tools such as right to work here in Michigan, first state in 60 years to repeal right to work, which makes us less competitive in terms of attracting manufacturing jobs here in Michigan. When you go ahead and you pass energy mandates after 2016, where we provided a bipartisan deal on energy that looks at cost and gets away from mandates and looks at a variety of energy sources to make sure that the reliability and price is first and foremost. That what they passed with the Green New Deal 15 months ago takes us backwards in terms of our energy development. So as you look at it, you got to get the basics first. You got to have a good education system. You have to have a good infrastructure here in the state. You have to make sure that you have a good permitting structure to provide a regulatory framework that's positive. I mean, just 2 weekends ago, the Detroit Free Press had an article about a developer that bought a building that hasn't been used in 4 years in the city of Detroit, and he was looking at putting in 49 market rate apartments into those, and he was getting kickback from the zoning board in the city of Detroit. I'm told that it takes up, if you don't have the right consultants or lobbyists in the city of Detroit, I'm told that it takes up to 4 years from a plan, a concept. It's saying you're announcing that you're going to do something to actually a shovel in the ground and building. And you hear it takes up to 2 years in the suburbs. I don't quite understand why it takes so long. At the end of the day, let's look at ways of actually speeding up those investments and choice. And then you look at Line 5. I mean, 7 years ago, it was announced that they were going to put a huge energy infrastructure project up in the Straits, thousands of jobs, securing our energy future with Line 5 and the Great Lakes Tunnel. And we're 7 years into it with an attorney general that continues to sue to stop it. And my hope with the Trump administration that we will see the opportunity to be able to actually get the Corps of Engineer permits. But at the end of the day, when you have a state government that's saying no and delaying permits, you're going to see that money, those resources go to other states. And no matter how much you use in terms of cash handouts or payments, you're not going to be able to compete and win against other states if you don't have the basics right on education, infrastructure, and permitting.
So over the years in the legislature, you've been at the forefront of a number of major legislative initiatives, whether it be an energy rewrite, whether it be any number of things, and chaired a number of committees. Where do you see some common ground over this next couple of years? Working with the Whitmer administration, with your Democratic colleagues in the Senate, and now with the Republican-controlled House.
Well, you look at last week, and they were forced to come to the table because they knew how bad that the Supreme Court decision was when the partisan Supreme Court last July was legislating from the bench and creating an unworkable framework on sick leave, essentially eliminating paid time off and having a one-size-fits-all sick leave policy. And then also with the tip credit, destroying the potential of 50,000 jobs around the state and 1 in 5 restaurants closing down. From that unpredictability, I'm already seeing over the last few months restaurants around the state that are closing down because the new mandates and rules are really making it complicated. So I'm happy that last week we found a landing spot again, that that really took on some of the most egregious positions on eliminating paid time off. I think we found a way to save that and having bank time, and we also found a way to make sure that restaurants can save jobs and be able to compete and win. Again, it wasn't as far as I would have gone. However, with a Democrat Senate, it was as far as I think we could have in terms of the wins. And so it's going to be dependent upon, I think, the majority leadership on whether or not they're going to continue to want to find landing spots and finding consensus with House and Senate Republicans. And so, fortunately, with our efforts to help win back the House last year and the House efforts is that we have a House Republican majority that will be taking a look at a lot of these issues. And so my hope is that as we go into this year, we can get away from things like what happened last year. The Senate House Democrats with the governor went ahead and increased the state income tax, diverted $670 million a year from the teacher pension fund without any new funding for our roads and infrastructure. And so my hope as we deal with this budget this year is that we stop the stealing from the state's pension funds. We continue to pay down long-term liability. We revert the state's income tax, and we go ahead and work on not just a down payment on roads, but looking at ways to make sure that our infrastructure is fixed in the long term.
Speaking of that infrastructure, we're looking at a number of ideas, I guess would be the best way to do that. Speaker Hall, as well as the governor. Can we expect something from the Senate in terms of a plan right there that you can share? Do you have any idea of what we might be looking at?
I think we're good partners with the House, and at the end of the day, that you look at what the House introduced in December and what they introduced in January. I think we follow the same philosophy of saying 100% of the taxes collected at the gas pump need to go to roads and bridges, and that is we have other surplus money that needs to go to roads and bridges, and we've followed. I think as you see the opportunities that open up with the phasing out of these mega tax credits and some of these corporate welfare funds, I think it provides some real opportunity to rebuild our infrastructure. But that takes legislative will, and that actually takes some conversation. So as I look at it, that what the House Republicans introduced in December and January is on solid footing.
Okay. Shifting gears just a little bit right here. How we're now a little over a month into President Trump being in office right here. What changes have you seen in Michigan's political landscape with that? Just from your vantage point.
Well, you saw last year that President Trump engaged with communities across the state, a very diverse set of communities across the state, from Muslim American communities that were once heavily Democratic, that now with the wokeness in the Democratic Party and all this coastal elites, not being able to call a boy and a girl, or even define what a woman is. I think you've seen a lot of opportunities there. Chaldean Americans, these Christian Middle Easterners, a big engagement there, big turnout, to folks from Monroe to Ironwood, and small business owners, people of different faiths. You saw a real change in African American men, working class across the spectrum, not just whites, but African Americans and Hispanics. And so as I look at it, is that the Republican Party has become the working class party. It's one where it's those that are work with their hands, or those that are small business owners, those that are farmers, folks that believe in the little guy over the state, those that believe in the family over central planning, those believe in the individual over state mandates. And that's something where we can grow upon, because let's be honest, America is an exceptional place. Michigan's an exceptional place. and we're celebrating 250 years as a nation next year. And let's figure it out. Figure it out. It's not just about the next election; it's about the next generation. And I think that's what last year was showing: is that uh, the the cost of living inflation, the open borders, the new wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and the problems with safety and security at home, and then the wokeness that's been permeating our schools instead of getting back to basics. I think that all came together to saying culturally we need to fix this, and 2026 in Michigan provides that opportunity. We had our state conventions over the weekend. And I think coming out of our state conventions, we're unified on the Republican side, and I've been seeing a lot of divisions on the Democrat side from different folks that continue to rip apart the Democratic Party. And you saw it last year. I had a buddy of mine who's a union member. We were in high school together, and a day after the election, he asked, "Do you think he's a Democrat? He's like, do you think my party learned anything from this election?" And I'm afraid they don't. I think they think it's all about messaging instead of actual policy. And he ended up agreeing with me that the Democrats need to figure out that the majority of Americans are not as far left wing and socialist as they have become. And until they correct that, I think the Republicans have a very good opportunity to continue the winning streak.
So I have kind of a two-part question right here. One very timely and one having to do with timing. The timely one is for the first time in my memory, we have a member of your caucus who is now the incoming chair of the Republican Party. Just kind of curious your thoughts on everything from how that's going to work and how you see that playing out. To two, the one on timing, you are down a colleague in the Senate and have been for over a month now. And if you have any thoughts on when we may see a special election to fill that seat.
We continue to call on Governor Whitmer to call a special election to fill that vacancy in Midland Bay and Saginaw area. And because of the Tri-Cities, those 265,000 residents deserve representation. And it's unfortunate that the governor, when it's a safe Democrat seat, calls those specials in lickety split time, moves heaven and earth to create special elections. But when it's a true 50-50 seat where Republicans have the opportunity to tie the state Senate this year, she continues to ignore the people in mid-Michigan. And so we're going to continue to call on the governor to call the special election to make sure that there's full representation in the state Senate. No fault to their own, but it's due to Senator McDonald Rivet deciding to run for Congress last year. And I think it's pretty telling that she hasn't called a special because I think they're afraid of losing it, and they should be with what we saw in last year's election. Is Senator Runstead is now the chair of the Republican Party. I think coming out of the convention this weekend, I saw a good unification coming out of there. And this is somebody who has served 10 years in the state legislature, has won competitive elections. In 2018, he was in one of the most competitive state Senate seats. So he knows what it takes to raise money, knows what it takes to win. He's been a consistent, good messenger, especially in the Metro Detroit area on broadcast TV and on radio. And so I look forward to working with him as we win back the state Senate and winning the U.S. Senate, governor's race, attorney general, and secretary of state, and keeping the majority in the state house.
Excellent. Excellent. So I wanted to ask you, also the Senate now has an announced candidate for governor. I think you know him. A lot of speculation on people looking at the U.S. Senate seat, as well as various other things out there. How do you see the Senate functioning over the next 2 years as we approach a historic election in 2026 right here?
I mean, I would like to see it at full 38 members. And, when the governor can call an election and we could get this filled by the summertime, and then we'd have a 1919 Senate. And so anything that would pass would have to get bipartisan support, which would be, I think, positive for the people of Michigan, that we concentrate on pragmatic issues instead of some of these far left socialist issues that we've seen over the last 2 years in the Michigan legislature. Is as we look at the coming year and a half, I think there's an understanding in a sense that whatever gets to the governor's desk is going to have to be, you're going to have to find a bipartisan consensus. And if they don't figure that out in the Senate at first, I'm already hearing with some of the bills that have started out, it's like, oh, we actually should get this over with a majority of Republican votes so that we might have a chance in the House. And so you see a real re-empowerment of Senate Republicans over the last few months. You saw that in December when Democrats in Michigan tried to go full Venezuela on Michigan families and businesses with the number of far left wing ideas that they tried to push through. Fortunately, in the Senate, we slowed them down and stopped plenty of them. And in the House, they were able to find one brave Democrat to walk out of the House with them to stop some of the worst excesses of what they were trying to push through. I mean, you look at it, even some good things that are named, that have a popular name on it, like polluter pays. Oh, who doesn't want polluters to pay? Absolutely. But what the bill that they passed that passed through the Senate would have done was shut down just about every brownfield and urban redevelopment site in the state of Michigan, because they had to recreate, they had to try to figure out what future environmental regulations look like. And so that doesn't fix anything. And so at the end of the day, how do we actually fix problems here in the state instead of trying to go far off on, whether it's big unions, big government, big trial lawyer, big environmental left, areas that we look back of how do we help working families, our students, and how do we put Michigan first?
So we had a question in the chat regarding the Mundy Township project. Over the weekend, I know the governor was in Washington, D.C. I believe she even had dinner at the table with President Trump, and was invited back to discuss that particular project right there. Just kind of curious your thoughts on and maybe any insight that you can give us on the Mundy Township.
I mean, it sounds like that's going to be up to the Trump administration and Treasury Department because of the amount of money that Western Digital seems to be having to rely on from the federal government.
Excellent. Well, we very much appreciate your insight and your time, and I'm going to wrap it up by asking you, now that you're a month in as an announced gubernatorial candidate, knowing you and the offices you've run for, what's been the good, the bad, and the ugly as being a candidate for governor right now, if you don't mind sharing.
Well, we started so early because we knew we had to engage folks around the state, a very diverse coalition of folks around the state, people of different ethnicities, different faith backgrounds, small business owners, farmers, whether they're timbermen up north or farmers down south, auto workers downriver, or furniture makers in Holland. There's a real diversity that's out there. And if I was going to meet people where they're at, which you have to do now, I had to start early. And so far, I've just been blown away and humbled by the support and encouragement I've been getting around the state. I've, whether it's been touring a factory in Romulus, meeting with pastors in Detroit, Muslim American manufacturers in Wayne County, or meeting with law enforcement officials and sheriffs up in Marquette. We've already made it to tours or events or engagements from Ferndale to Muskegon, and from Marquette down to Monroe, and I'm looking forward to staying on the road. We've already raised more in the first month than what Governor Whitmer raised in the first 7 months when she announced 8 years ago. And we also have already we've spent less as an announced candidate in the first month than what an unannounced Republican candidate spent in the last 2 weeks in December. And so, as we look at over the next coming year, we're going to raise the resources that are needed. I've been humbled by the folks that have come out. We're going to spend as little as possible, live off the land, and earn media, social media, and events. And we're going to engage folks in all 83 counties where they're at. I've been blessed by already having a dozen sheriffs from around the state already come in and endorse me this early. I know it's early, and so I've just been blessed by folks from, St. Clair County to Mason County down to Jackson and Hillsdale that have outside of my current district that have already endorse me and say, you're the kind of leader that we know will have your back. And so at the end of the day, what I'm hearing around the state is that people recognize my Michigan First agenda. People recognize that I'm going to put Michiganders first. And that means that I'm going to be a governor that will have law enforcement back, that will have small business owners backs, farmers backs, students backs, and that's going to be part of our Michigan First agenda for putting Michigan students first, families first, and workers first.
Excellent. And that's Michigan, not Minnesota, right?
Well, it's next year with the election, it's going to be a big turning point for the state of Michigan. And it's just as it was at the federal level last year. But next year, as I started off, if we do nothing, if we just keep the status quo, we're going to lose a net of 700,000 people over the next 30 years in Michigan. We're going to be a poorer, less populated state, or we can decide to shake things up and be a more dynamic, growing, and richer state. And I'm going to put a positive vision forward, as that's going to be part of my Michigan First agenda of saying that we're going to be a more prosperous, growing state. And that's something where we got to get back to basics. We got to put Michigan families first, Michigan students first, and Michigan workers first if we're going to do that.
Great. Well, we thank you so much for your time today. We'd love to have you back, and we will see you in what promises to be a very, very busy week this week with, of course, State of the State and everything else going on. And again, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to chatting soon.
Hey, thanks, Rob. And this is the end of the day: is who's willing to make the tough decisions to solve some of the toughest problems that we are facing. And it's enough about, and I think it comes down to who's serious about public policy and who's serious to solve these issues. And that's something we're a reputation of, and that's something I'm going to continue to work on and spread that philosophy around the state.
Great.
Talk to you
Thanks
soon.
again.
Yep,
Appreciate
bye-bye.
everyone participating. Have a great day.